Imagine if you could change this to this, or even this, by changing a single class name. Well, you can, and it's a little something I picked up by inspecting the Stripe website. Most folks call it stealing, but coders call it reverse engineering. And today we're going to show you how you can reverse engineer this approach to themes using CSS custom properties to make your code cleaner and faster to implement. All right, let's get into it. All right, so here we are on Stripe's website. We're on their payments page. And if we scroll down a little bit here, we have this section that I thought had kind of a cool looking style. So it has this dark blue background. Then there's like a pre-title or label or something that's teal. The title text is white. Paragraph text is like a sort of grayish blue color. And then we have some links, which are teal, and a button, which is also teal. And if you hover over the links or the button, they turn to white. Then if we go a bit below that, we have another section, and this one's kind of like a light mode versus the previous section is like a dark mode. It has a white background. The main text and title are this sort of dark gray, almost black color. And then we have the accent color, which is purple instead of teal. If you hover over the button or the link, they change to, looks like, the text color. So you might notice that there's a lot of design similarities between these two sections. Even if the color scheme is different, they have a lot of the same styles for their fonts, the spacing, and so on. So most likely Stripe is using some kind of component system to generate the markup for content blocks like these that get used a lot, so you don't have to handwrite the HTML every time you need to load this onto a page and reuse it. And it would make the most sense if they also had their styles planned out so that they can be reused, every time the block is used as well. And the most efficient way of reusing styles, I think, is by using utility classes. That way you can just add the class name to the element in your markup, and then it'll automatically load these styles for, the dark theme, the light theme, and so on. And that's actually what Stripe has done here. So let's take a look at how they've built out these themed blocks, and then we're going to design and build our own, much simpler version. So back here in the dark theme block, I'm going to inspect it in Firefox. And there we go. So we have these different sections in the page, and I'm just trying to find the sort of parent element for the section. And it looks like it's this section tag. And you can see that on the page, it looks like, the previous one was in its own section tag and so on. So this is kind of how they've divided up the content in the page. Each section has its own section tag, which I think makes a lot of sense. And the section tag, it's a little bit hard to see here because I'm zoomed in, but it has a lot of different class names. And, these names are pretty nicely descriptive. They basically tell you what they do, which is, what utility classes do. You really want those descriptive names. So just looking at the class names here, we can guess that the section has a dark theme, and then it has what they call a flavor for Twilight, which I'm assuming is another kind of theme of some sort. And then there's one for accent, which is set to teal, which I'm assuming is what's making the links and the button teal colored. And then there's some other ones for, it looks like the angled bottom here is from this section angle bottom class. So things like this make it much more efficient in terms of reusing your styles and just adding those to these classes. So that is something that we're going to try to do with our own approach. Now, let's make sure we're still selected on the section tag, and let's take a look at the actual style rules that they have here. And I like doing this on existing websites just because you can kind of look in the styles and see how they've built things, which I think, it's a good way to learn. So if we look at the rules, we can see that they're using CSS custom properties for basically everything. You can tell that they're CSS custom properties because instead of, a regular CSS property name, they have these kind of custom names, and they all start with a double hyphen or double dash. And that's what tells you it's a CSS custom property. So at the top, the accent teal class is making the accent color set to this bright teal color, as you might imagine. And if we keep going down, looking through the other custom properties, looks like some of these are used to set the gradient colors or shading. And then what we really wanted to look at here is the theme dark styles. And you can see that we have some properties here that are setting, various colors like the background color, link color, etc. And it's kind of interesting. Some of them, like this background color, they're set to an actual color with a hex code. But then we have some other properties like link color, for example. It's set not to a hex color directly, but it's set to the accent color CSS custom prop, which we saw earlier at the top, which was set to this teal color. So it's a pretty cool feature of custom properties that you can either set them to, a value like a hex color if you're using them for colors, or you can actually set a custom property to another custom property. And, if we keep going down, there's just like a ton of different styles for different things. This is obviously a little beyond the scope of this video and also probably my own knowledge, to be honest. So we're really just going to focus on the colors here from this dark theme and also the light theme. So if I'm looking at this, I'm trying to figure out, how they are sort of setting these colors. One thing you can do if you have a lot of styles that you're trying to look through, you can filter them. So I'm just going to filter by the word color. So this means that what's going to show up is only selectors that have any kind of rule that has the word color in it. Or I think if the selector itself has a word color, I think it'll also show up. So now that we're filtering for color, let's look at the button, and I'm going to inspect just this button, and I want to see where the styles that are controlling it are coming from. So we're inspecting this anchor link, which is being used as the button. So let's kind of start from the top. So we can see in the button, the background color property is set to var button color, which means it's set to a CSS custom property called button color. And the var function is basically how you load the value for a CSS custom property. And we can also see that the color property, which controls the text color, is set to another custom prop called knockout color. So let's see where these custom properties are getting their actual color value from. Now, if we scroll down the rules to the theme dark styles, we can see that there's a property here called button color, which is what was loaded up top for the background color. And this is set to the accent color custom property. And then if, I want to look and figure out where that's coming from, I can add to the filter. So accent color, I guess it's not case sensitive, but now you can see the accent color is this teal color. And we can also do the same thing for knockout color. So let's search for knockout color. And we can see here, so as we were looking at before, the text color is set to knockout color. So here we go. Knockout color, the property is being set to this dark blue, almost black color in the theme dark section. Or rather, the theme dark class, I should say. So I know that these colors and custom properties and stuff can seem pretty complicated, and it is. Part of the reason for that is the Stripe website it's a huge, complex site that I think a lot of people, developers and designers, probably use as inspiration. So, again, the example that we're going to be building is going to be much simpler and hopefully just kind of show you how these custom props can work to make a theme work. But, despite the complexity, the advantage of using a system like this for your styles is that you can control the style theme by adding or subtracting classes from the element. So for example, this is the section tag, which contains the entire section. And as we said earlier, this has a theme dark class name, but if we look above it, this one above it has a theme white. So if we change this dark class to theme white, then we can see the style has changed. And all we did was, change the class name from theme dark to theme white. Now that we know how that works, let's implement it on our own project. I didn't want to bore you with this part, but I went ahead and mocked up a design in Figma with some simple themed blocks. We've got a light theme, a dark theme, and we have a headline, paragraph, and a button. Now we're ready to build out the site. All right, so I'm going to be building this project out in VS Code over here on the left and using HTML and pure CSS. And I'm going to put all my source code up on GitHub, which is linked down in the description below. So right now we got VS Code on the left here, and then I have Figma open on the right to show the mobile design, just to use it as reference when we're creating the markup and stuff. So in VS Code, I have the project folder open. There's nothing in there at the moment. So let's create our index.html file. And we're also going to create our CSS file, style.css. So close that sidebar, and in our index.html, let's create some boilerplate using Emmet. And then let's change the title to Kitten Delivery Service. Okay, and now let's just see if we can get this loaded. Here we go. All right, and I'm loading the local website via the live server VS Code extension. So now let's create our markup. Just because this is not like a real website, I'm not going to be putting in some of the tags that I'll usually use for a real website. Like usually all the content should go in the main tag, and then any part of the website, like the main part that would be sort of syndicated, would be put in the article tag. I'm not going to use any of those just because this is kind of like a proof of concept thing where we're going to list different sections. So what I'm going to do is, I think, put all the blocks in their own section tag, kind of like we saw on the Stripe website. So anyway, let's start by linking our CSS file. And it is loading style.css, which is what we have, which is good. Okay, so I think at the moment that's good for the head tag. So we're going to type in our section tag using the Emmet shortcut, the Emmet shortcut. So we'll say section tag, and then we're going to kind of go off the design. So the first thing we want in the block is going to be the headline. And if this is on a real website, it would probably be an H2 tag. So H2, then I'm going to copy the text, paste it in. Then under the H2 tag is the description. So let's copy that. And I'm going to put this in a paragraph tag. There we go. So then after that is our button. So let's copy that button text. Then after the paragraph, we'll put it in an anchor or a tag. And we'll leave the href blank because it's not going anywhere. And I'll paste in the button text. Okay. All right, now if you remember in the desktop design, I'm going to zoom out a bit here. We created that layout grid where we have a 12-column grid, and we wanted to max the content out at, I think, 1200 pixels wide. I think just for the sake of the website, I'm going to change that a little bit in the style, so it'll max out at 1000 pixels, just so it'll be a bit easier for you watching a video to see, because I'm going to be zooming in quite a bit. So in order to limit the width of the content, what I usually do is in the section tag, I'm going to create a div and give it a class of wrapper, and then put all the content inside that div. And the reason we're doing this is because, let's just hide this. For the blocks that have a background color, you want that background color to extend all the way across the left and the right, but then you want to limit the content in it, so the text content, to that 1000 pixels or however wide your max width is. And you don't want to limit the content on the section tag because that's where the background color is. And if you did that, you'd have these weird sort of white bars on the left and the right. So that's why we have a section tag. And then we have the wrapper div with all the content in it. So I think that's a good start. Let's start writing our styles. So in our style.css file, first I'm going to add some boilerplate styles. So the first one I usually use is in the HTML selector. I'm going to say box sizing border box, and you want to do this pretty much anytime, because this makes sure that if there's padding on the element, it won't be added to the width of the element, but it'll be kind of included. So if you set an element to be 300 pixels wide and it has 20 pixels of padding, you want the final size to be 300 pixels. You don't want the content to be 300 pixels and then padding to be, adding to that, because that'll kind of mess up stuff. So box sizing a border box. You also want to set font size to 100%. And this is going to make sure that your font size will be reading from whatever your browser default font size is, which is default set to 16 pixels. Then after that, we'll do a wildcard to select for all elements. And we're also going to select for all pseudo elements, so before and after. And we want them to inherit the box size from the HTML tag. And I'm sure there's other ways of doing this, but this is just how I've seen it when I was reading up about this. Then let's add the body tag, and we'll just kind of reset some of the styles here. So we'll set margin to 0, padding to 0. And then the next thing we want to do is we want to set our font family. So in Figma, we had set all the text to Open Sans, which is a Google font. So let's go there. And I want to search for here it is, Open Sans. And we want regular and bold weights. So, I think I must have done this already. Yeah, so we got Open Sans, regular, and bold. So let's copy the code snippet, and we want to put it up in our index.html file. I usually put it before my main style sheet. I don't know if it actually makes a difference, but we're going to reference the Google font in our style.css. So I feel like maybe it should be before that. Anyway, then we want to set Open Sans as our font. And I just put it on the body tag. It would probably still work if you just set it on like the HTML tag, but I just set it on the body. Okay, and then there's a couple other resets that I do. I don't know if this is 100% like correct to do, but there's some tags in the browser that have default styles. So like all the H tags like H1, H2, H3, and also paragraph tags, they will by default have both a margin top and margin bottom. I just like to zero out the margin top so that all the space between these elements only comes from the margin bottom. I just found that to be simplest for my own workflow, but you might do something different. So I'm going to, because in our design, we're only going to have the H2 and the paragraph tags. So I won't put any other H tags in there like I normally would, but I'm going to set margin. You can say margin top or margin block start if you're using the logical properties. So set the margin top to 0. And then we want to add styles for that wrapper div that we added to our HTML. So wrapper. And this is going to look a little complicated, but I'll explain what we're doing. So we're setting the width of the wrapper, and the max width we want it to be is 1000 pixels, which is 62.5 rems. And I know this just because I did this earlier, but you can get from rems to pixels, or from pixels to rems by dividing by 16. So 1000 pixels to convert to rems divided by 16 is 62.5. I usually use Sass, so I would use like a Sass function to convert for me, but since we're doing pure CSS for this project, I'm using the calculator. So this is what we want our max width to be. But what we're going to do is we're going to use a function called the min function. So in the min function, it can take 2 parameters separated by a comma, and it's going to make the final number value be whatever is less between these 2 parameters. So it's kind of constantly calculating what the value of each of them is. So for desktop widths, we don't want to get bigger than 62.5 rems or 1000 pixels. But then for the first parameter, we're going to use another function, calc. And in this, we want to let it be set to 100% and this is good for mobile widths because, as you can see on mobile, it's 100% of the width minus the margin that we want on the left and the right, which is 24. So together it's 48 pixels of space. So the other parameter is going to be 100% minus 48 pixels. And I think I'm going to leave it at pixels because I don't want it to scale up if you change the browser-based font size, because then if it does scale up, then the space is going to also get bigger, which will take away space from, readable elements. So that's why I'm going to have the margin for the mobile stuff stay at pixels, but then we're using rems for the desktop widths because if you change your browser-based font size, you probably do want to have the width of the content scale up as the text is getting bigger. So I hope this kind of makes sense. So basically what this is doing is if the the wrapper width, or the width of the content in the blocks, is going to be either 100%, basically 100% of the width minus the little margin space, or if 100% of the width is going to be bigger than 1,000 pixels, then it's going to instead be 1,000 pixels wide. So that's how on desktop it's not going to get larger than that. Okay, the other style I want to add to our wrapper is to add some padding. Because you can see in the padding, because you can see in the blocks, there's padding added on the top and bottom. And we're not going to worry about padding on left and right since that's being taken care of by the wrapper width. So we just want to set padding block. And let's start with the mobile padding actually. So for the mobile padding, there's 60 pixels on top and bottom. And for desktop, it is 80 pixels. So we'll do the mobile one first. So I'm going to say padding block 60 pixels. Again, I'm using pixels because I don't want it to scale up. And then we need to add the desktop padding block in a media query. So media, and we'll try the newer syntax for media queries where you can just say width instead of min width. So if the width is greater or equal to 62.5 EMs, and you should use EMs in your media queries, it's just accessible in terms of scaling up, but also for some reason I think using rems, there's some weird bug in Safari. I don't know if it's still happening, but the last I tested, it is happening. It just makes your media query breakpoints hit at slightly different points. It's not a huge deal, but I try to use EMs for all my media queries. So if the width is greater than 1,000 pixels or 62.5 EMs, then we'll use the padding block of 80 pixels. I'm sorry, this is not right. I'm so used to writing my media queries in Sass. So in the media query for pure CSS, write the selector. There we go. Cool. And then we want to add our styles for the button. So this is going to be in the A tag. So A. And maybe I'll add a class for a class of button, just because we don't want it to affect every single anchor link. So again, the padding for the button, we said 12 pixels on top and bottom, 36 pixels on left and right, and it's the same between mobile and desktop. And then to round the corners, we're doing border radius, if I can type, I believe it was 12 pixels. Yes, corner radius of 12. Okay, so that's good. So next up, let's start adding the styles for our text. And we want to maybe start with the headline, so the H2 tag. So let's go back up here. Actually, yeah, this is fine. So our styles are going to be added here. And we want to go from 30 pixels on mobile to 50 pixels on desktop. So one way that I handle this with a approach that doesn't require media queries is with this tool, Fluid Typography Calculator. So if you do a search for that, it should be the first result. So you just input your minimum font size. So this is the font size you want for mobile. I think it was 30 pixels. And it doesn't matter if you use pixels or rems, it'll convert it to rems. Max font size was 50 pixels. And then you put in your minimum viewport. So I usually put this at 375 pixels, which is the iPhone's viewport. And then the max viewport will say 1,000 pixels for our max size. And then it just calculates this for you, which is pretty cool. And it's using the clamp function. And this basically, clamp will it has 3 parameters. So the first parameter is your minimum size, which is going to be, for us, 30 pixels. The last parameter, the third parameter, is the maximum size. And then in the middle is sort of the preferred size. And that usually uses viewport width units, as it does here, so that it can scale up as your viewport width changes. So this is kind of setting like the minimum and then the maximum, and then in the middle between those two viewports, it's going to scale fluidly. So that should be good for the H2 tag. And let's also add sizing for the paragraph tag. So for the paragraph on mobile, it is 22 pixels. and 28. So we'll use the same viewport widths, but we'll just change the font size from 22 to 28. And we'll copy that. That looks really long, but it's, you know, it's doing work with math. Okay, and then the button styles. And this one on mobile, I think they were just slightly different. It's 20 pixels on mobile, and then 22. So it's gonna be very similar, but we'll just put it in here anyway. Okay, and then I'll just add the font size stuff underneath. And if you're wondering, the reason that there's two font size rules is because this first one is for older browsers that don't support clamp. So then if this doesn't work for that older browser, then it'll sort of revert to the previous font size style. And this is set to the smallest font size. Okay, so I think our text styles are good for now. You know, we can always tweak things later if we need to. Now let's get the spacing set. So again, we'll start kind of at the top. So the space under the headline is 30 pixels on mobile and 40 pixels for desktop. And then I think I did the spacing the same for the paragraph tags. 30 for mobile, which is the same, and 40 for desktop. So we can set the spacing stuff combined with H2 and P in that compound selector. So I think maybe just for simplicity's sake, we'll just use a media query. So we'll say margin bottom or margin block end. And we said it was 30 for mobile. And because this is space between two text elements, I think it might be a good idea to use rems. So 30 divided by 16 is 1.875. This is because, you know, the font gets really, really big. It might be helpful for readability to have space between the lines of text. And then we'll add a media query. So media, and we'll do the same thing as below. Width greater than or equal to 62.5 EMs. And then we'll do again our compound H2 and P selector, margin block end, and that's going to be 40 pixels for desktop. So 40 divided by 16 is 2.5. Okay, so that's the spacing. So, you know, we haven't finished our styles, but we have added some of the sort of basic styles. So let's see how the website looks. All right, not bad. Let's inspect this. Break it out into a separate window. So, oh, I forgot something for the wrapper. I want to center this. So we can do that. Because right now what it's doing is it's maxing the width out, but because things by default are left aligned, we need to actually center it. So we can do that by setting margin inline to auto. And that's how you can center block elements. So now, if we select wrapper, we can see that there's a margin on either side. And it's getting centered. So, and if we zoom out, you can see even more what it would look like. Cool. So I think that's pretty good. Let's look at the spacing here. Well, yeah, it looks like it's right. I think it's just, it looks big because we are zoomed in a bit. Let's try 80. Okay, I think that's pretty good. We do need to, I think, set the button font weight to bold. And we also maybe want to get rid of that default underline for links. So what I usually do is text decoration none. There we go. And then just for the button, we'll say font weight 700 for bold. Okay. Oh, I didn't add the class of button to the anchor link. There we go. So now it looks like the padding and stuff is working. So yeah, so just to test, let's see background, blue, color, white, just to quickly test. So yeah, that looks pretty good. Okay, so now that we have our basic styles set, we can start adding the theme styles. So What I'm going to do is I'm going to add classes for each of the themes. And this is, again, kind of copying what Stripe's approach was. So we have a light theme and a dark theme, and there's going to be 2 accent colors for each one. So let's create our theme, dark. And then here is where we're going to set the CSS custom properties from the colors from Figma. So let's start adding our CSS custom properties, dash, and we'll say text color. And for the dark theme, the text color is going to be this white color. We'll copy that, and this is the hex code. And then for VS Code, you can actually hover over this swatch, and you can click on the top to change the color format. So I like to use HSL. And then after that, let's also set the background color. Background color, and that's going to be this dark background. I wonder if I can, oh, here we go. I don't know if you can copy that easily, but let's just copy the hex code again. There we go. And then the accent color for the theme dark. So theme dark, and then we'll add the class for the accent colors. So let's try accent. And the first accent color is this blue purple color. So accent dash blue purple. And this will be accent color. What the heck? There we go. Then convert that to HSL. And then the other one's going to be the next accent color, which is this teal color. So I'm just going to duplicate this. Teal. Copy that. HSL. Cool. Oh yeah, so also for the button, we need to set the knockout color, which is the button text. So I think what I'm going to do, because the dark theme, let's think about this. I'll set the knockout color for each accent color. So for example, the first one is going to be white, knockout color, and we'll set it to the text color. So we can actually set it to var and then load text color. And then the next one for the teal button, the knockout color button text color is the dark background color. So we'll do the same thing. We'll copy the CSS custom property and use the background color for the button text for the teal button. Okay, so let's just do the same thing for the light theme. All right, so now we have all of our CSS custom properties set up. Now let's actually add these classes to our block and make sure everything works. So I'm going to add the class for the theme on the section tag. So class, and let's try dark dash theme, and then accent dash blue purple, I believe was the first dark theme accent. All right, so let's save. Okay, background color is not working. Oh, I didn't actually set the properties on the elements. So, okay, after the body tag, we want to add section tag. And for the section, we're going to say background color, and we're going to set this to var background color. Oh, I mistyped this. It's supposed to be theme dash dark. There we go. Okay, so now the background color set to the dark background color because the section tag is using the theme dark class, which is setting the background color variable to this dark HSL color. and then it's adding it to the background color of the section. So let's also type in color for the text color, and we'll say var and load text color. There we go. And then we also want to add the styles for the buttons. So for the A button, let's just add the background color toward the end. So background color, we're going to say var dash dash accent color. Okay, good. And then text color for the button is going to be var dash dash knockout color. And there we go. Okay, so this looks pretty good. There's one little issue here. It looks like the margin from the paragraph, yeah, there's not enough space. So this is because the anchor tag by default is display inline, which means that vertical margins don't work on it. So that's why the margin for the paragraph, you can see it's extending down all the way to the actual text itself pretty much. So one way you can get rid of this is by setting the button to display inline block. So vertical margins will work on it. So there we go. So now we can see the bottom margin is ending right at the edge of the button, which is what we want. This looks pretty good. Let's try out responsive design mode. And this is how it looks on mobile. So yeah. There we go. Cool. So another thing we probably want to do if this is a real, component we were building is we want to add a hover state for this button. So let's do that now. So we'll say under a button, then add the pseudo class for hover. And here's where we're going to update the background color and probably the button text when you hover over the button. So I want to change the background color. And what I think I might do is I'm going to make the button background color for hover the text color. So it's going to be white, and then I'll make the button text the dark background button. So let's do that. So background color is going to be the text color. And then color for the button text color is going to be the background color. So let's try that. And I can see it's changing. And I think this is kind of nice because this can be used for any of the themes because we know the background color and the text color are always going to be, very contrasty to each other. So I think that should work. And let's make it a little nice and add some transitions. So we'll say we want to transition both the background color and the color properties since those are the properties that are changing. So transition property, and we'll say background color, comma, color. And then we'll say transition duration. I usually do 250 milliseconds or 2.5 seconds. Then transition timing function. And I usually use ease in out to kind of slow down the animation at the beginning and the end a little bit. There we go. Not bad. Okay, so I think the basic block actually seems to be working pretty well. So just so that we can display all the sort of different combos that we have, let's create more section blocks. So I'm going to select the first one and duplicate it. And let's make this one light theme so it'll contrast with the dark theme block. So light, and then the first accent color for the light theme was, I believe, magenta. So you can see the markup is pretty much the same as the first section, and the literal only difference is going to be the class name that we're using. So let's save that. And there we go. And the hover state works too, which is awesome. So let's do this again. So I'm going to copy the dark section to put under the light section. Then we'll change to the other accent color for dark, which was teal, I believe. And there we go. And we'll do the same thing for the last light section one. And it was purple, I believe. Yeah. Not quite as contrasty, but I'm not going to split hairs for this. This is just kind of like a proof of concept thing. But I think this is pretty much working. Now, in addition to reverse engineering a website, if you want to succeed as a web developer, you also need these soft skills that everyone talks about. So check out this video to learn how you can be that team member that people love to work with.